So who is Icon? To start, he's one of the most powerful beings in the DC universe, but you've probably never heard of him. He's only really been in one mainstream DC media project, that being Young Justice. Great show, highly recommend watching. So in saying that he's part of the DC universe, it's a little bit more complicated than that. Milestone Media is its own separate company. Now, they started with a licensing deal and a publishing deal with DC. So DC gets to slap their logo on their stuff. Milestone got to publish through their already established channels of publication and all that kind of stuff. And they've shared things and collaborated and done stuff throughout the years. But that being said, it's complicated to use Milestone characters in DC projects. And now that Milestone Media is really back in a new way, they're working on their own stuff as far as live action adaptations and things like that because they hold the right. But as far as comics go and comic publications, there's a little bit more opportunity to have them overlap. And we've seen that with the return of Milestone and everything that we're going to talk about later. Most of those being since the beginning of the 2020s and all of the Milestone return books and season 1 of Icon and Rocket and all that kind of stuff. But in a lot of ways, Milestone is still part of DC in its own way. There's probably a whole video we could do just on all of the different comics and publishers and things that DC has acquired or sort of absorbed or has deals with over the years that make for a very interesting universe. Sometimes characters are a part of it, sometimes they're not really a part of it, sometimes they're a part of their own universe within the bigger universe and things like that. But Icon, Static Shock, Hardware, and Shadow Cabinet launched with Milestone Comics back in 1993. The goal for that entire imprint was greater representation and quality storytelling. The real question is Icon stronger than Superman? I'd tell you right now, but I think you need all the facts first. I'm going to take you through his very first appearance, his backstory, his powers, his key relationships, and the best stories to read so you can enjoy the awesomeness that is Icon. Most superheroes arrive as icons of justice, but Icon is the one who literally becomes one by choice. He's a Superman-level powerhouse from the Milestone universe. Icon is a hero forged not by destiny, but by ethics, community, and responsibility. And he plays on some of Superman's tropes. If you only know Icon from Static or the most recent Milestone revival, this is where you need to start to appreciate where he's come from all the way back at the beginning. So, Icon appears in Icon #1 back in 1993, created by Dwayne McDuffie and Mark Bright. Icon launched as one of the flagship heroes of the original Milestone line, a line like we mentioned created to bring richer black representation and grounded, socially aware superhero stories. Icon #1 kicks off with a date, 1839, but we're in space with no dialogue to guide us through. A being of some kind is in a crashing ship, maybe battle damaged or breaking down in the middle of nowhere. The being enters an escape pod and crash lands on Earth. We're led to believe this is comparable to our Earth's deep south in 1839, and the first to come upon the crash pod, a woman, a slave. The genetic resequencer on the pod reshaped our alien friend into a black baby. Something I found really interesting here is that the first almost 5 or 6 pages of the comic are just silent. All action is to be interpreted and watched. It's just really interesting, and again, I just love how comics are able to do things that other media can't. While I know there's obviously B-roll and you can show things in a movie or something, but it's just different. So after this sequence, we are brought back to the present day of the comic, 1993, in Dakota City, the old downtown district of Dakota City, where we meet a man named Augustus, having this flashback or memory to the crash and events in 1839. His law partner is ribbing him as he's lost in thought, accusing him of thinking of a woman, but Augustus is deeply contemplating the words of a woman, but not in that way. He's contemplating what he should do with his life. We're taken back just a few days to a young woman and her friends, a woman who wanted to be a writer. She wanted to be like Toni Morrison, but she's only 15. What do 15-year-olds have to write about? Her friend has the idea to loot some suburb houses while the cops are downtown for something called the Big Bang. Now, the Big Bang is a crucial piece of Milestone comic lore. Essentially, we learn later on in Icon Comics and other Milestone books that the Big Bang is this gang war. But in another sense, it was also this event tied to a tough-on-crime political act of force by Dakota City leadership as well. They equipped the police force with tear gas to subdue gang riots. And in a massive confrontation, the gas is deployed, but come to find out, the gas is laced with a chemical compound called quantum juice. The release of this compound in the gas results in a small group of superpowered individuals, changed individuals, but it also murders hundreds, including children. Many gang members were just straight up killed. This results in a lot of fallout, not just politically, but socially and culturally, as you can probably imagine. Going back to our friends in the car, Raquel doesn't want any part of this plan, until her friend plants the idea that they could get enough to get her a typewriter, just like her favorite writers. So Raquel and her friends head up to Prospect Hills in the suburbs to try and get as much as they can for a little quick money. They make it to their first house, and it doesn't take long until someone comes downstairs in the first house they hit. To their surprise, it isn't some stuck-up white family, it's Augustus from before. And at first, Raquel and her friends think it's some family butler for the rich people who must own the house. Augustus corrects them and instructs them very lawyer-esque on how to remove themselves before anything more happens. Something we should know about Icon that you'll learn more as we go through this, and if you read more after this, there's just something in how he's written and how he carries himself that he's so above human things at times, and it's not quite robotic, it's this different sort of eloquence to him, if you will. In all the interactions, especially early on in his own book, the character speaks in this very matter of fact and almost like a god or a higher level being who's just seen it all, knows it all. So when he addresses people, he's almost never confused or jeopardized because of his own emotions, if that makes sense. So it makes for a really fun read and some interesting moments throughout the comics that's just different. Icon is one of my favorite characters to have interact with other DC heroes because of this reason. I just find his dialogue interesting and how it sort of reflects other characters as they interact. Another reason for this is probably because pretty much invincible and almost never in a position where he's deeply afraid. So his communication always reflects that in his everyday stuff, because I think we underestimate how often fear plays into even everyday interactions with ourselves and how much that carries over into beings, or how much that would be taken away if you are invincible. So back to the story again. So Augustus is trying to get these kids out of his house and convince them to leave this kind of life behind, when Noble, one of Raquel's friends, decides to shoot at the man, to which he says, "You caught me off guard, but now I'm ready for you," which is just terrifying. But the kid continues to shoot at him until he breaks the gun in his hand. They all scatter, or attempt to scatter. Augustus rounds them up, showing us he can also fly, and fly in a very controlled, almost ethereal floating flight, which is much different than a Superman or something else. After a brief talking to from Augustus Freeman to these kids, Raquel gets home, gets lit up by her mom for being out, and while she's thinking about the night, she can't help but be enamored with Augustus's powers, and her brain starts turning with what could he be if he did more? What would it look like for somebody who looks like them to have the power that he has and do something with it? So the next day, she visits him and pitches him on her idea. Icon and Rocket, superhero duo who does some actual good. Good, like explaining to her and her friends the other night, but even more, standing up and representing more people like them. Intervening on behalf of so many people, standing for something more than themselves, and using those incredible powers for something bigger, for the whole city, for the whole world. He mulls it over for a couple of days and brings her a belt that essentially absorbs incoming energy of multiple kinds and provides the wearer with the ability to focus and exert that energy at will. Basically, Icon's in. This belt will enable her with some super strength and invulnerability initially, depending on the energy that she's able to absorb. Her powers and the depths of Icons as well develop over time, of course, like all characters, but throughout the run you see a lot more about that. Rocket and Icon meet atop the Paris Island Bridge, where they suit up and fly over to City Hall because there's some kind of situation breaking out. The entire building is surrounded by heavily armed police, and what do you think they do? Icon decides to drop down in the center of the police, right outside the building, and ask if they would like a hand, which doesn't go super well. Raquel mutters, "I bet Superman never has to deal with this," which, if you think about it, Superman never does. This is where the first issue ends, leaving off on this cliffhanger. And this is technically Icon's first appearance. I do think if you're looking to get into Icon and want to give it a shot, I would read through the first original 4 or 6 issues before you make a decision about him being for you or not. Let me know in the comments if you'd like a deeper story overview for the original Icon run, and I'll happily do it. I will say the situation at City Hall in the next issue escalates into this classic 90s comic action, and it's really cool. Someone is holding the mayor at gunpoint, wanting the mayor to come clean about the Big Bang and the gas, how all the kids were killed, and all the insanity that is around all that. His name is Kevin, the guy holding up the mayor, and he was there that night. He got gassed just like the rest. While he watched everyone die, he lived. But he wasn't left untouched. He transforms into this beast named Payback. And the story is really interesting and fun, so I highly recommend you dive into this for yourself. But again, I would love to cover it in another video. Just let me know if anybody's interested in that in the comments. So moving on to Icon's team-ups in the larger Milestone and DC Comics universe. Now, obviously, Raquel is kind of his main person. He's kind of, even more than I would say Robin is to Batman, Rocket defines Icon's heroic identity in a lot of ways. She kind of serves as this moral and ethical reminder of why he does what he does all the time. In a lot of ways, Raquel and Icon's relationship serve as the equivalent to what the Kents are for Superman, even though they have a Batman and Robin sort of crime-fighting dynamic. Of course, if you want to understand more of their relationship and their dynamic, just start with the first 4 issues from this run. So you're looking for icon number 1 through 4 from 1993. She becomes his sidekick, his conscience, his student, and the narrator of much of the early run. Their dynamic is really the emotional heart of all of Icon storytelling. Moving on to more in the Milestone universe, essentially he's got team-ups and he appears with everybody in the Milestone lineup for the most part, but you're going to want to look specifically for Icon and Hardware. They have large conflicts over ethics and responsibility. It's the tech genius versus alien powerhouse sort of thing. Moving on to the Shadow Cabinet, also from Milestone. But like we said, Icon basically teams up or crosses over with most of the Milestone lineup pretty quickly into their early 90s book. So we've got Static, Hardware, Blood Syndicate, Dharma, and Rocket. Here we get to see him with the bigger Justice League stories and just more as a full-fledged hero in my opinion. He's recognized a lot as a Superman-level hero with a more somber presence comparatively. And most notably or excitingly, there's been a resurgence of Milestone Comics support leading to the return of the Milestone universe around 2021 through today. Milestone was relaunched under the Earth M Milestone Returns line, which brings us to our reading recommendation. If you really want to get involved with Icon, again, I always recommend starting with where characters first appeared just to really understand what the writers were thinking and what they wanted to get across early. There's a lot that goes into launching a character, and I think understanding what those first appearances are is just really important for having a deep respect of the character. So go back to Icon number 1, and I'd go at least through issue 8. There's about 42 issues in his first book. Dive all in if you want, but essential reading, issues 1 through 8. These are the Icon and Rocket, the Big Bang Fallout stories. This is core Milestone mythos. Then if you want a little bit more from the same run, go to issues 13 through 19. Worlds Collide in 1994 has a crossover with Superman, Steel, and some other DC heroes. Pretty fun reading. There's some really deeper emotional moments in 1995, again from Icon's original book, so issues 27 and 28. And then highly recommend going to the more modern reboot of Icon and Rocket with Icon and Rocket Season 1 that released in 2021. It's a modern reboot that kind of reworks his origin for more contemporary themes and pacing, but still the same Icon and Rocket. I'm going to have some more deep cut recommendations that are a little less known, but just amazing reads, so please check those out in the description. Lastly, we're going to talk about Icon's powers and answer that question from the beginning. Can Icon beat Superman in a bare bones brawl, power to power? Now, I know this can be a hot topic whenever we get into comic book characters fighting comic book characters, but hear me out. Icon has some really interesting powers that kind of separate him and make him worth talking about in this fight. Icon is one of the most powerful heroes in DC canon. We talked about that. He's comparable to Superman and Martian Manhunter in more than one way. They're all aliens who are insanely powerful in their own way. Icon's powers include super strength, flight, near invulnerability, energy manipulation and projection, longevity and slow aging, and matter manipulation. This is one of his rarest but strongest powers. Some examples of matter manipulation: rebuilding environments, reconstructing matter on a microscopic level, amplifying Rocket's inertia belt technology. Something should be noted, this isn't necessarily a power, but it is a superpower in and of itself, but it's something noted for other heroes, and I don't know why nobody really talks about it with Icon, but it's his intelligence. He's not some average guy. This is a very intelligent super being. I don't know why it's always the intelligence question is left on the table for other characters. Somebody talks about Peter and Spider-Man and they're quick to notice intelligence, or Tony Stark because he builds suits and all that, or Reed. I mean, oh my gosh, every time Reed's brought up, the guy's so smart, blah 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 blah. But anyways, this might be a hot take, but I think Icon in his prime, modern Icon can take Superman. His stamina and power reserves far exceed what I understand Superman to have, and I love Superman, but I think Icon could take him down. Let's say Superman goes evil or something. It wouldn't be the easiest fight, of course, but I think Icon can go quite the distance. You have somebody who's so strong, but can also move almost like the Flash, so you can't hit him. But with Icon's matter manipulation abilities, I think he could alter the environment in some way, giving him the edge and taking out the super speed variable. I think it could make it difficult for him to defeat Superman, but let's say Superman goes evil, I think Icon could figure it out. But what do you think? I know the fandom is pretty split when you get into the weeds on this issue, but I genuinely want to hear your thoughts. I don't love heroes versus heroes talks all the time just because I feel like we split ourselves really fast, but they're fun to speculate at and just think, and this is comic book fandom 101. And again, thank you so much for watching. If you haven't already, please like this video, and if you want more comics, cosplay, and general nerdy fun, consider subscribing. It all helps me continue to be able to make these videos, and I'll see you in the next one.